There are seasons in life when nothing is loud, yet everything feels heavy, when effort doesn't fail, but it also doesn't arrive, when days move forward, but answers stay still. Most people believe pain comes from loss, but often the deepest ache comes from waiting and not knowing how long. This is a story about patience, not the kind that smiles through pain, but the kind that quietly survives it. In a small, unremarkable town, there lived a man named Aaron. No one would have called his life tragic. No one would have called it successful either. He was simply waiting for progress, for clarity, for life to finally respond. And without realizing it, that waiting was shaping him in ways he never expected. This story isn't about how to wait faster. It's about how patience becomes strength and how hope is reborn when you stop fighting time. Aaron woke each morning before the town fully remembered itself. The streets outside his window were always empty at that hour. No cars, no voices, only the pale stretch of road and the soft hum of distance. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt unfinished. His days followed a steady rhythm: wake, work, return, repeat. He showed up on time. He did what was asked, sometimes more. From the outside, his life looked stable, almost admirable in its consistency, but inside, something was always leaning forward. Aaron believed patience was about endurance. You wait, you tolerate, you push through, you hold your breath and tell yourself, one more day. That belief shaped everything he did. He had been patient for years, patient with his work, patient with his goals, patient with life's refusal to open the next door. He never complained, not out loud at least. He believed silence was strength and discipline was proof of worth. Yet each night when the lights went off and the world stopped asking things of him, the wanting surfaced. It wasn't greed, it wasn't envy. It was a quiet question that never left him alone. When does effort become enough? Aaron didn't dream wildly. He didn't ask for miracles. He only wanted movement, some sign that the waiting had meaning. The town he lived in was small, the kind of place where people learned early how to stay. Most lives there unfolded slowly and predictably, like seasons that never surprised anyone. Aaron told himself he liked that. Stability, he believed, was the reward for patience. Still, whenever he saw the same faces at the same corners, whenever conversations repeated themselves year after year, a pressure built in his chest. Not panic, not anger, just weight. He watched others move forward in ways he couldn't explain. Promotions, relationships, new beginnings. He clapped for them. He smiled. He meant it. But later, alone, he wondered what invisible rule he was failing to follow. Aaron worked harder after that, not because he loved the work, but because discipline gave him a sense of control. If he couldn't choose the timing of his life, at least he could choose how prepared he was when it finally arrived. He told himself waiting was noble. He told himself patience was proof of character. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't yet see, was that patience without peace slowly turns into self-abandonment. Each day he waited with his eyes on the future, and with every step forward, he left a little more of the present behind. This was the beginning of his journey. Not the moment everything broke, but the moment the weight became noticeable. The wanting hadn't ruined him yet, but it was teaching him something quietly, that waiting, when misunderstood, can feel like standing still in a world that keeps moving. And Aaron was standing very still. Aaron learned to measure his days in effort rather than outcome. If nothing changed, at least he could say he had shown up. He adjusted his routines with quiet precision. Earlier mornings, longer hours, fewer distractions. He treated discipline like a language, one he spoke fluently even when no one was listening. At first it worked, not in grand ways but in small, reassuring ones. A task completed faster than before, a skill sharpened just enough to be noticed, a nod of approval from someone who rarely gave one. These moments felt like proof. They whispered, "You're getting closer." Aaron held on to those whispers tightly. He told himself that patience meant trusting the process, that life was a long road and roads didn't reveal their destinations all at once. You walk, you stay steady, you don't rush what takes time. There was comfort in that idea. Each small win gave him a reason to keep going, a reason to believe that waiting wasn't passive, that it was active, disciplined, earned. He began to imagine a future version of himself looking back with gratitude, saying, "I'm glad I didn't quit." But beneath the progress, something else grew: restlessness. It arrived quietly, disguised as ambition. A subtle tension in his chest when praise felt too small. A lingering dissatisfaction, even on good days. Aaron didn't question it. He assumed it was normal. After all, wanting more was what kept people moving forward. Yet the more disciplined he became, the more he noticed time itself becoming heavier. Weeks felt longer. Months stretched thin. The finish line he imagined never seemed closer. It only became clearer in his mind, more detailed, more demanding. He began to believe that patience was something you did in order to arrive, that peace came later, that fulfillment was a reward waiting at the end of endurance. So he postponed rest, postponed joy, postponed stillness. "I'll feel calm when I get there," he told himself, wherever there was. When people asked how he was doing, he answered honestly but briefly, "Making progress," he said. And it wasn't a lie. But progress without presence has a cost. Aaron started to miss moments he couldn't get back. Evenings blurred into mornings. Conversations passed without landing. He was building something, yes, but he wasn't living inside it. Still, hope stayed alive. Not because life had rewarded him, but because discipline gave him structure, and structure felt like safety. As long as he was moving, he didn't have to face the fear that maybe waiting wasn't leading him anywhere specific at all. He believed the road would eventually explain itself. That time would justify the patience he had given it. What Aaron didn't yet understand was this: small wins can keep you walking for years, even when you're quietly walking past yourself. And the longer the road stretched on, the more that quiet truth waited for its moment. Aaron had marked the day in his mind long before it arrived. Not on a calendar, but in expectation. This was the moment everything was supposed to shift, the point where patience would finally reveal its purpose. He had prepared for it carefully, steadily, believing that effort, when given enough time, eventually becomes undeniable. For a while, it seemed that way. There were signs, subtle encouragements, conversations that hinted at possibility. Nothing promised, but enough to let hope breathe. Aaron stayed calm. He told himself not to rush the feeling. He had learned restraint, or so he thought. Then the answer came. Not dramatic, not cruel, just quiet. An email. A brief conversation. A few words spoken with polite distance. The opportunity wasn't happening. Not now. Maybe later. No explanation that made sense. No mistake he could correct. Time had said no. Aaron read the message more than once, searching for hidden meaning. He didn't find anger there. He found something worse: finality. It wasn't rejection that hurt the most, it was the absence of reason. If he had failed, he could improve. If he had rushed, he could slow down. But there was nothing to adjust, nothing to fix. All that discipline, all that waiting, and still nothing moved. The world outside continued as usual. People laughed, traffic passed, days kept their rhythm. Only Aaron felt suspended, like he had stepped forward and found no ground. That evening he walked longer than usual, not toward anywhere in particular, just away from the place he had expected answers to live. The streets looked the same, but they felt unfamiliar, as if time had subtly rearranged them while he wasn't paying attention. He realized then how deeply he had trusted waiting. He had believed patience was a contract. I give time my effort. Time gives me my moment. But time, it turned out, didn't negotiate. That night, doubt crept in. Not loud, not panicked, but persistent. Questions he had avoided for years finally spoke. What if waiting doesn't guarantee arrival? What if effort isn't always noticed? What if patience isn't rewarded the way we imagine? Aaron didn't cry. He didn't break down. Instead, he felt hollow. Hope didn't disappear, it fractured. And in the silence left behind, self-doubt took its place. He replayed every step that had led him here, searching for some missed signal, some wrong turn. But the path had been steady, honest, disciplined, which made the outcome harder to accept. That was the night Aaron stopped trusting time, not because he became bitter, but because something fragile inside him finally cracked. Patience no longer felt like strength, it felt like exposure, and in that quiet fracture the fall truly began. After the answer arrived, time didn't slow down, it sped up, leaving Aaron behind. Days blurred together, not because they were busy, but because they were repetitive in a way that no longer made sense. He continued his routines out of habit, not belief. The same discipline, the same structure. Only now it felt hollow, like repeating words from a language that had lost its meaning. Aaron told himself he was fine, that this was temporary, that patience simply needed to be reapplied. But patience, once cracked, doesn't return to its original shape. His mind became a place he avoided during the day and couldn't escape at night. He replayed conversations, decisions, moments of hope that now felt naive. He searched for the exact point where things went wrong, as if identifying it could rewind time. This wasn't reflection, it was fixation. He clung to the past because it still felt alive there. In memory, the future hadn't failed him yet. Aaron began measuring his worth against an outcome that no longer existed. Each morning felt like standing in front of a closed door, hand still raised, waiting for it to open, long after the knocking had stopped. The waiting turned inward. Where patience once faced forward, now it faced backward. He waited for regret to soften, waited for disappointment to lose its edge, waited for himself to feel normal again. But healing doesn't respond to pressure. Friends noticed the change. They spoke gently, cautiously, as if he were made of something fragile. Aaron smiled and assured them he was just tired. He didn't know how to explain the truth, that he wasn't exhausted from effort, but from holding on. Letting go felt like betrayal of the time he had invested, of the discipline he had practiced, of the version of himself that believed waiting would be enough. So he held tighter. He revisited old goals with new urgency, trying to resurrect them through force. He worked harder, not wiser, longer hours, less rest, more isolation, as if intensity could undo reality. But the more he tried to reclaim what was lost, the further away it felt. Aaron didn't realize he had stopped living in the present. His body was there, but his attention was anchored to a version of life that had already moved on without him. Patience had quietly turned into punishment. He punished himself for hoping, for trusting, for believing the road would eventually reward him. And in doing so, he trapped himself between what was gone and what refused to arrive. This was the most dangerous kind of waiting. Not the waiting for something new, but the waiting for the past to change its mind. And the longer Aaron held on, the heavier everything became. Eventually, even effort grew tired. Aaron didn't decide to withdraw from the world. It happened slowly, so quietly that by the time he noticed, isolation already felt normal. He stopped reaching out, stopped explaining, stopped expecting anyone to understand what he himself couldn't name. The days lost their edges. Morning and evening blurred into the same muted tone. He still woke up on time, still completed what was necessary, but nothing reached him anymore. Not disappointment, not hope, just silence. This wasn't sadness. Sadness still asks to be felt. This was emptiness. The absence that remains when the mind gives up trying to make sense of pain. Aaron spent more time alone than he ever had before. Not because he wanted solitude, but because conversation felt heavy. Every question sounded like expectation. Every answer required energy he no longer had. At night, he lay awake without thoughts racing. There were no arguments in his head, no plans to fix things, only a quiet awareness that something inside him had gone still. He wondered if this was what patience eventually led to, not peace, but numbness. If waiting too long could drain meaning from effort itself. The world outside continued without him. Seasons changed, people moved forward. Time kept its distance, indifferent and steady. Aaron felt invisible to it all. There were moments when he considered giving up entirely, not dramatically, not in despair, but in resignation. The kind that whispers, maybe this is just how life is. No big turning point, no breakthrough, just acceptance of emptiness. And yet somewhere beneath that silence, something remained. Not hope, not ambition, awareness. A small, quiet noticing that this wasn't living. That whatever patience was meant to teach him, it couldn't be this. He didn't know what came next, but he sensed that staying here would slowly erase him. This was the lowest point, not because something terrible happened, but because nothing did. No struggle left, no resistance, only the stillness before change becomes possible. Aaron didn't know it yet, but silence, when listened to long enough, always speaks. The moment didn't announce itself. There was no shift in the sky, no feeling of destiny arriving. It was an ordinary afternoon, one of many Aaron had learned to move through without expectation. He had taken a longer route home, not to clear his mind, but because he no longer cared which way he went. The town park sat quietly between streets, mostly empty at that hour. A few benches, old trees, the kind of place people passed through without noticing. Aaron sat down without thinking. Across from him, an elderly man was feeding birds. His movements were slow, unhurried, each gesture deliberate, as if time itself had softened around him. The birds gathered without fear, hopping close, waiting. Aaron watched longer than he meant to. The man didn't speak at first. Neither did Aaron. The silence between them felt different from the silence Aaron carried, lighter, less demanding. After a while, the man glanced over and smiled, not out of politeness but recognition. "Waiting?" he asked. The question caught Aaron off guard. Not because it was invasive, but because it was accurate. "For something," Aaron replied, unsure why he answered honestly. The man nodded, as if that explained everything. He tossed another handful of crumbs to the ground and watched the birds scatter and return. "I used to think waiting was about patience," the man said. "Turns out it's about trust." Aaron didn't respond. He didn't need to. The words settled gently, without pressure. The man continued, almost to himself. "When you trust time, you don't fight it. When you don't trust it, every day feels heavy." Aaron felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, just recognition. "What if nothing comes?" Aaron asked quietly. It was the question he had been carrying for months. The man smiled again, this time softer. "Then something already has," he said. Aaron frowned slightly. The man stood, brushing crumbs from his hands. "If you're still here," he added, "you're already in the middle of it." He nodded once and walked away, leaving Aaron alone with the birds and the silence. No advice, no instructions, just a perspective Aaron hadn't considered. For the first time in a long while, the waiting didn't feel like a punishment. It felt unfinished. Aaron didn't leave the park right away. He sat there longer than necessary, not searching for meaning, not replaying the conversation, just letting the moment remain as it was. For once, there was no urgency to extract a lesson, no pressure to turn insight into action. The waiting felt different. That evening, nothing in his life changed on the surface. The same room, the same quiet, the same unfinished questions. But something subtle had shifted in how he occupied those spaces. Aaron stopped asking when. Not because the question was answered, but because he realized how much energy it demanded, how it kept him leaning forward, never fully present, always bracing for the future to justify the past. He began practicing something unfamiliar: staying. Staying with his breath when the mind wanted escape. Staying with stillness instead of filling it with distraction. Staying with effort without attaching it to arrival. This wasn't discipline the way he used to practice it. It was softer, less demanding. He still woke early, still showed up, but he stopped measuring the days by progress. Patience, he learned, wasn't about enduring discomfort until life changed. It was about letting life be what it was, without leaving yourself behind. There were moments when impatience surged, sharp and convincing. Old thoughts returned, reminding him of timelines and expectations. But instead of obeying them, Aaron noticed them, like weather passing through. He learned that acceptance wasn't surrender, it was alignment. Slowly, the silence inside him began to change. It no longer felt empty, it felt spacious. Aaron found himself noticing small things again. Light shifting across walls, the rhythm of footsteps, the simple fact of being present without anticipation. Healing didn't arrive as relief, it arrived as steadiness. He realized that waiting didn't mean life was paused, only his resistance had been. This was the beginning of rebirth. Not dramatic, not visible to anyone else, but real. For the first time, Aaron wasn't waiting for life. He was staying with it. The old urgency didn't disappear, it waited. Aaron discovered this on an ordinary morning when a familiar restlessness stirred without warning. Nothing had gone wrong. Nothing had changed. And yet, the pressure returned. Quiet, persuasive, almost reasonable. "You're getting too comfortable," it whispered. "Stillness is nice, but don't confuse it with progress." The thought unsettled him. For days he carried it like a weight in his pocket, taking it out when no one was looking. The mind has a way of romanticizing what once hurt us. The old urgency dressed itself up as ambition, reminding Aaron of who he used to be, the man who chased outcomes, who measured worth by movement. There were moments when he almost believed he had made a mistake. That patience without pursuit was just another way of falling behind. An opportunity surfaced, small, imperfect, but familiar in its promise. It carried the same language as before. Soon. Almost. Just a little more effort. Aaron felt the pull immediately. His body recognized it before his mind did. The tightening chest, the forward lean, the quiet readiness to abandon stillness for speed. For a brief moment he considered it. Old habits don't announce themselves as old. They arrive as solutions. He imagined returning to the pace he once knew. Longer hours, sharper focus, narrow vision. He could do it. He knew that. Discipline had never been his weakness. But something stopped him. Not fear, not doubt. Awareness. He noticed how the urgency felt. Not energizing, but desperate. How it demanded sacrifice without asking whether the cost was worth it. He realized that before, he had mistaken pressure for purpose. This time he paused. Aaron didn't reject the opportunity immediately. He sat with it. Let it breathe. Let the excitement rise and fall on its own. He gave himself time, something he once denied himself in the name of progress. And in that space, clarity surfaced. He saw how easily patience could be replaced by performance, how quickly healing could be traded for validation, how tempting it was to believe that rushing meant living fully. But strength, he was learning, wasn't in how fast you moved. It was in how deliberately you chose. Aaron declined the opportunity, not with bitterness, not with certainty that something better would replace it, but with honesty. He wasn't ready to return to a life driven by urgency alone. The decision didn't feel triumphant. It felt calm. That night, he slept deeply for the first time in months. The test had come, and it had passed. Not because he had become immune to impatience, but because he recognized it when it arrived. Transformation, he realized, isn't proven in silence. It's proven when the old patterns knock, and you don't open the door. Nothing remarkable happened after that. No breakthrough. No announcement from life that the waiting was over. And yet, something fundamental had shifted. Aaron stopped waking with the feeling that the day was behind him before it began. Mornings felt neutral, open, unpressured. He moved through them without the constant urge to catch up to an invisible deadline. For the first time, time felt like a companion instead of an opponent. He still worked, still planned, still cared. But his effort no longer carried the sharp edge of demand. He didn't rush moments away in anticipation of better ones. He didn't treat the present as an obstacle to endure. Peace arrived without permission. It wasn't excitement or happiness. It was alignment. Aaron realized that for years he had tied purpose to outcome, to arrival, to proof that patience had been worth it. But purpose, it turned out, could exist without conclusion. He found meaning in showing up without expectation, in choosing consistency without self-erasure. in allowing life to unfold without gripping it too tightly. The waiting was still there, but it was spacious now, not heavy, not personal. He noticed that he laughed more easily. That silence no longer felt like absence. That rest didn't require justification. People around him sensed the change, even if they couldn't name it. Conversations felt less strained. His presence felt grounded, steady. Aaron didn't claim to have mastered patience. He simply stopped fighting it. He understood now that waiting wasn't a punishment or a test of worth. It was a season, one that could be lived fully or resisted endlessly. And without trying to force it, hope returned. Not the fragile kind that demands results, but the quiet kind that stays, even when nothing arrives. This was the new dawn, not marked by achievement, but by peace. If you've stayed with this story, it's because some part of you recognizes the waiting. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that comes with countdowns and certainty, but the quiet waiting, where effort is real, time is slow, and answers refuse to show themselves. Aaron's journey was never about learning how to wait longer. It was about learning how not to lose himself while waiting. Here is what his silence teaches us. Patience is not the ability to suffer quietly. It is the ability to remain present without resentment. Waiting does not mean life is paused. It means life is asking you to stay instead of rush. Discipline becomes destructive when it demands you abandon your peace to prove your worth. Letting go is not quitting. It is releasing the illusion that force controls timing. Purpose does not live at the finish line. It lives in how gently you walk the road. Healing begins when you stop treating time like an enemy and start treating it like a teacher. Strength is not speed. It is the courage to choose steadiness when urgency feels tempting. If you are waiting right now for clarity, for progress, for something to finally arrive, know this. You're not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not failing because life is quiet. Some seasons are not meant to reward you. They are meant to reshape you. And one day you won't look back and say, I survived the waiting. You'll say, that's where I learned how to stay. If this story gave you peace, share it with someone who is tired of rushing. And if you want more stories like this, calm, honest, and deeply human, you know where to find them. Until then, breathe. Stay. Time is already working.